Today we are looking at distance over time graphs, which are the data that we collect that show us how far we went and how long it took us to get there. So the reason that we use these is we can track distance or displacement, but we can also use them to find the speed of something. So if you look at these two metrics that we're comparing, we have in column A, we have our times in this table, and then we have our distances in column B. Those are important because those are the two things that you need to have in order to find something's speed. So we do distance divided by time to find speed. So because those are the metrics, they're the things that we measure and calculate from an object's speed, we can use the graph of this information to also tell us some things about its speed. So I'm going to just show you, this is on an iPad, how to make these graphs because they are a little bit different than if you are on a computer. So here we have our first table, which is walking speeds, if you look at this at the bottom. So if you are opening a Google Sheets on an iPad, it should bring you to the screen looking like this. And then at the bottom, you can choose between the different pages in the books, is what it's called. So there's different sheets within it. It's just like flipping pages. So on this first page, we're looking at walking speeds. And it says the table below shows the distance traveled by a student walking for 1 minute. Make a line graph of the data below. So what we're going to do is, obviously we need to make a line graph. So once you click on anywhere in the spreadsheet, you will see that the pages at the bottom disappear, and now you're actually within the sheet. You can now edit things that are in there. So what we're going to do is we have our distance and time. If you click on a cell, you'll see in the upper left corner and the bottom right corner, these little dots pull up, and I'm going to zoom in on this so we can see that better. If you click on one of those and drag over, this is how we can highlight groups of data. So we can group or take out the whole table, highlight the whole table. Down at the bottom, it'll start doing some math for you, some math that it thinks you might want. We don't need any of these numbers today, though, so we're going to leave that. So here we do want to make a chart. It is a little bit tricky on an iPad sometimes that there aren't as many controls to make a chart, so we have to be careful with what it's going to give us. Okay, so here they've made us a bar graph. It looks pretty good actually right here. What I want it to be though is a line graph. Okay, so this one worked out. If we look at it, we have our distance traveled in meters is the data that it was plotting. That's our dependent variable, and it happens over seconds. So if this is what we like, if you wanted it to look different, you could have it smoothed out. You can fill in the area underneath it. You can do whatever you'd like. I'm going to leave it this way. If for some reason it's not the way you wanted it, once you go to this type, you can change it and change it back and forth until it looks the way you want. The other option could be a scatter plot, but we're going to do a line graph. Keep it simple today. So once you are done, if you like the graph and you want to add this to your table, in the upper left-hand corner, there's the check mark that will do that. If you don't like it, that something went wrong and you need to highlight more data, in the upper right corner, just hit the X, and you can start over. So you press that, and it pops in. It's going to cover up most of our sheet here. So what I'm going to do is, if you click on it, you can then drag it around. So you touch it once to highlight it, and then you drag it wherever you want. And we are done with this graph. So I want us to look at it for what you can actually find out by looking at this graph. So we have our distance along the y-axis, our time at the bottom. And I said before, I'm going to write in here, speed equals distance divided by time. So if we know that this is our equation to find speed, there's another concept or another equation in math that you probably learned last year that fits this same format, the same equation format, where one thing equals x divided by y. It's actually y divided by x in this case. So what I'm looking at, I'm not going to try and make you guess it, is slope. So the slope of a line is equal to the rise divided by the run, or the change in y divided by the change in x. If we look at what is our y and what is our x on this graph, we see that y, what would be the rise, is distance here, and run, what goes along the x-axis, is time. So if we look at this, if distance is the rise, time is the run, that means the slope of the line is the speed. So when we look at distance-time graphs, if we want to see how quick something was moving, when it was moving the fastest, we look at how steep the slope is, or flat the slope is. So by looking at a graph, it makes it easy to find where something was moving the fastest. So we look here and we can see it's pretty even. It's a little bit faster at the beginning. This first, from 0 to 10 seconds, was fast. From 40 to 50 seconds was a little bit faster. But just quickly by looking at it, if we look at this last section that goes from 50 to 60, we can see that this is when the person was moving the slowest, and you can really quickly look at it and see that without doing any calculations, just by visualizing how steep the slope is. So these graphs are really useful for that because it's a very easy way to just quickly look without having to do any math. And the reason for that is because of this little trick, the fact that these equations match up. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to copy that. So now we're done with this sheet. So once you're done, we're going to click up in the upper left-hand corner that check mark again, and you'll see that brings us out. That speed and slope box is outlined right now because I copied it, so it's telling me that that is still on my clipboard. But now we can go between our different sheets. So we are going to try this again with these car speeds down here. I'm going to, before I forget, paste this little rule that because speed is distance over time and slope is rise over run, speed will be the slope of our line. Here we have data that's a little bit different because our numbers aren't so nice anymore. What's different here is that the time in hours is not a regular interval, and this is something that if you were graphing by hand might be a little tricky to do because you have to be careful not to you have to measure out the intervals for each one. So this is a time where using a computer is very nice to do it. Another issue is going to be if we look at our distances, we have some very small variations at some of these points that would be difficult to graph as well. If we're going on a scale from 0 to about 250, if I need to give the difference between 40 and 52, it would be difficult to accurately put that on here. So what we're going to do is to do the same thing as before. We're going to hope it works the same way. So again, highlight the whole data table. We're going to go to that plus sign at the top. We're going to say add a chart. And it looks like it did not work this time. Okay, so this is A2 through A9. So we have the wrong amount of data. So if we look here, they think that we have 2 lines. So this is where we're going to say, no, that is wrong. So I'm going to go back and see why this is different, why it worked the first time and not the second time. try this again. Make sure we've highlighted all of our data. And it doesn't want to work for us. So this is an issue with doing this on an iPad. I did think this was going to happen to us, is that here you can see that they don't think that these are the same. They aren't putting this as X and Y, and there's no place to go where we can change this information. So if I say OK to this one, the only things I can edit are the names here. So we'll say OK, this is wrong. Let's try it if we just do our distance in kilometers. We're going to add a chart. I want it to be a line. So this is showing me my distance, but it's not stretched to the right parts at the bottom. So I'm going to put this in here just to show what should be happening is this line should be our y-axis and the red line should be our x-axis. So if this happens to you, what I want you to do is to put in the graph that it gives you if you're working on an iPad, and then put a note on Google Classroom for this assignment. So in the future, I will show you how you can work around that by trying to do it through Chrome instead of Google Sheets, but that's a whole other lesson, and it'll take you more time than I want you to spend on this assignment. So hopefully the walking speed one works for you. It's kind of hit or miss whether or not it's going to interpret the graph correctly on an iPad, which can be a pain. But I hope this helped you just for the general graphing skills on here, and we will figure out a better way to do it if it messes up. So I want you to see that sometimes even when you do the exact right thing that worked the first time, sometimes it doesn't work, and I'm not sure why that happens. But I'm not just telling you that it wasn't your fault. It really wasn't your fault if that happens to you. Okay, so do your best, and we will go over this next class period.